In 2023, in Boston, a woman needed an embolization coil after complications during childbirth, but the hospital didn't have one because it was repossessed 2 weeks prior for unpaid bills. Sungida Rashid died because the hospital was part of Steward Health Care, which, over more than a decade, has been run by private equity ownership into massive debt, all while investors plundered it for nearly $1 billion. This is how.
But tonight, we're going to know about the lighter side of Ralph de la Torre that I have been so privileged to know, and I can't wait to be part of this roasting process.
Where the pay is good.
So everybody knows that when you have a home on the table, the next thing you need is you need to own a boat.
It's understood. We'll do or die.
All of you will be contacted by the Department of Justice to begin giving depositions shortly.
Learjet SWAT team on a midnight run.
So, once upon a time in 2010, there was a non-profit hospital system in Massachusetts called Cerberus Capital Health Care, which was owned by the Archdiocese of Boston. It operated 6 non-profit hospitals and several non-acute medical facilities, and was the second largest hospital system in the state. But it was struggling financially, having accrued over $275 million in debt, and the Archdiocese decided to sell it to a private equity firm in New York called Cerberus Capital Management. Yes, Cerberus, as in the multi-headed dog in Greek mythology that guards the gates of the underworld to prevent the dead from escaping. I guess the name Hydra was already taken. Cerberus bought the non-profit system with the intention of turning it for-profit and renamed it Steward Health Care Systems. The CEO of Caritas Christi, a former heart surgeon named Ralph de la Torre, became CEO of Steward as well, and is credited as leading the charge on the new for-profit company, although they also had some high-profile directors on their board, including former Speaker of the House, John Boehner. But before the system could change tax status from non-profit to for-profit, Cerberus would, by law, need the approval of the Attorney General of Massachusetts, Martha Coakley, who approved the deal so long as Cerberus agreed to 4 stipulations. First, Cerberus would have to pay off Caritas Christi's debt and assume liability for its full pension system, worth about $200 million. Second, Cerberus would have to invest $400 million in capital expenditure to repair and upgrade the hospitals. Third, Cerberus would have to agree not to close or sell any of the hospitals for 3 to 5 years. And finally, they could not take on any new debt for the purpose of paying itself dividends. Cerberus agreed, spending a total of $895 million to close the deal. In the next year, Steward acquired 2 more non-profit hospitals, turning them into for-profits too. Then, they began doing something that would eventually contribute to the collapse of the entire system. It's called a sale-leaseback deal, where they would sell the real estate of their hospitals to another company, and then the hospitals would rent it back from that company for millions of dollars in annual rent, on the properties that they had previously owned. They did this to raise money quickly, even though it didn't make sense long term, because usually they would have taken on debt to pay themselves, but they weren't allowed to in this situation. This was their way around that. 13 properties were sold to Healthcare Trust of America for $100 million. In addition, the hospitals themselves would still be responsible for property taxes, insurance, and maintenance on those properties. In the next few years, Steward began making budget cuts at its facilities, and in 2015, they had their first profitable year, at which point Cerberus and Steward did another sale-leaseback deal, selling all of their hospital properties to a company called Medical Properties Trust, or MPT, for $1.2 billion. So once again, the hospitals themselves would have to rent back their own facilities from MPT. Steward then used about half of that $1 billion to pay back the loans that Cerberus took out to purchase Steward. This is the critical part of private equity investment, which I'll explain shortly. With the rest of the money, Steward began a national expansion, buying more non-profit hospitals around the country, turning them into for-profits, and selling the hospital's real estate to MPT, who would lease it back to them.
It's been 1 year since the founding of Steward Health Care. Steward Health Care, now 10 hospitals strong,
growing to manage 36 hospitals in 2017.
In addition, Steward paid out at least $100 million in dividends to Cerberus investors, as well as CEO Ralph de la Torre. Later investigations would show that the hospitals themselves received almost none of the money from this sale, even though they were saddled with renting their own facilities as a result of it. This was their whole model, buying hospitals that had been undervalued and stripping their value out, all under the guise of making things more efficient, which, in for-profit land, means more profit. So Steward continued buying more and more hospitals, and by 2017 they became the largest for-profit hospital system in the United States, with 36 hospitals and hundreds of smaller medical facilities. The company had an estimated annual revenue of $8 billion, and its top management team moved from Boston to Dallas. Then, in June of 2020, Cerberus Capital Management was ready to pull out, and made a deal to unload its 90% stake in the company to a group of physicians at Steward, who purchased it by borrowing $335 million from Medical Properties Trust, who themselves would own the remaining 10% stake in the company. By the time Cerberus left the picture, they had made a profit of $800 million in just 10 years. After that, Steward continued its business strategy. In 2021, they spent $1.1 billion to purchase 5 hospitals in Florida, then immediately sold the real estate to Medical Properties Trust for $900 million, who rented the properties back to those same hospitals. But by 2023, cracks began to show when Steward began downsizing in several states. They started selling off some of their hospitals, blaming low Medicare, Medicaid reimbursement rates and patients who couldn't pay their bills. Various news outlets began reporting that Steward wasn't paying its own bills, including to medical device companies, on-site security companies, medical staffing agencies, construction companies renovating their properties, who downed tools halfway through building, and even their own employee paychecks. At one Steward hospital in Massachusetts, a local pizza shop stopped taking orders from the hospital because they weren't paying, ever, for pizza. Around this time, medical device companies began repossessing their equipment from Steward's hospitals for unpaid bills, and in October of 2023, at St. Elizabeth's Medical Center in Boston, a lady named Sungida Rashid gave birth, and after the delivery, it was discovered that she had a liver bleed. She needed an embolization coil to save her life, but the hospital didn't have one because it had been repossessed for unpaid bills of $2.5 million. Rashid suffered major complications and was transferred to another hospital network that did have a coil, but it was too late and she died. Totally unnecessarily. Then, In January of 2024, Medical Properties Trust put out a press release indicating that Steward owed $50 million in unpaid rent. Steward agreed to address this by selling some of their hospitals, in addition to taking out a loan of $60 million from Medical Properties Trust. It was around this time in early 2024 when media scrutiny really ramped up, with journalists accusing Steward and Cerberus of having strip-mined the company, siphoning hundreds of millions of dollars for their own profits, while hospitals lacked critical supplies, basic maintenance, and properly trained staff, as Steward had replaced many of them with cheaper, poorly trained individuals. In one Steward hospital, a patient almost died of a heart attack because nobody in the hospital knew how to operate an EKG machine. Special media attention was paid to CEO Ralph de la Torre's lavish lifestyle. While Steward was mired in debt and unable to pay its bills, while people were dying, de la Torre was rolling in money, having received at least $100 million in dividends from the company, in addition to his estimated annual salary of $16 million. $16 million, but not the $2,000 to $3,000 device needed to save Mrs. Rashid's life. Upon moving to Dallas, de la Torre purchased a $5 million mansion in an elite community where his neighbors include George W. Bush and Mark Cuban. He purchased a $40 million yacht called the Lady Sheridan, which he renamed the Amaral, roughly translating to bitter grapes. And these grapes of wrath feature 6 bedrooms, a library, a movie theatre, and it has an annual operating cost of $4 million. He's got another yacht worth $15 million, but that one is only used for luxurious fishing trips because, let's face it, it's not that good, is it? Fancy sports cars, lavish vacations, expensive private schools for his children, all of this while Steward put its patients' lives at risk. Listen, let's all be calm. Here's what needs to happen, I think. On a fucking pike. For everyone to see and learn. And I haven't even mentioned Steward launching an international division, where the goal was to purchase state-owned foreign hospitals and turn them into destinations for medical tourism. Although really, I suspect the goal was to pretend to be going to do that, but really strip out everything and then sell it to a sucker before they realise what you've done. In one case, they bought and privatised 3 hospitals owned by the government of Malta, where they were accused of defrauding the government of 400 million euros and using it to pay off various shell companies, in addition to making expensive personal purchases. The same day they received money from the Maltese government, millions of dollars of company money was spent on luxury car dealerships, jewellery stores, flower shops, and expensive private schools in Switzerland. They were accused of bribing the then Prime Minister with what was really government money sent via Swiss accounts. They have also been connected to the attempted assassination of an investigative journalist who criticised the hospital deal. Thousands of Maltese citizens were protesting in the streets, shouting, "Give us our money back, mafia and thieves," and eventually Steward International was exiled from the country. Although, in my opinion, not exiled hard enough. Back in the United States, in May of 2024, Steward filed for bankruptcy, and they insisted their scheme with MPT was totally not the reason all this happened, but rather the fault of all the filthy pores. This, of course, is yet another lie. In the filing documents, it was disclosed that the company owes about $9 billion, including $6.6 billion in long-term rent agreements, $1.2 billion in loans, about $1 billion in unpaid bills from vendors, $290 million in unpaid wages, and they owe about $32 million to the federal government for overbilling of Medicare and Medicaid. Initially, there was talk about Steward seeking a bailout from the state of Massachusetts, but the House of Representatives, apparently in a day where it had its faculties and senses, said no. And then the governor, Maura Healey, told Steward that they had to pack their shit up and leave the state forever. And that's where we are now. The company is in bankruptcy proceedings, and I'm sure even more horrendous information will be coming out in the future. This was all deliberate and all about short-term profit. The whole model was making as much money as possible quickly, despite the long-term ramifications, and getting out before those ramifications were realized, with their plan to sell their stripped assets to one sucker or another who thinks that they're buying a streamlined hospital rather than one that has been totally gutted. Here, they just happen to have been caught out because they stripped these particular hospitals too quickly and too greedily. What's going to happen to the leadership of Steward? Nothing bad. I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of them don't become ambassadors or something. Maybe eventually one of them will become the head of the CIA. Probably their sons will do really well. They'll become like the CEOs and directors of the next generation. And the cycle will continue. Cerberus, absolutely nothing will happen to that because they're operating as intended. This is what America is all about, is benefiting the rich. GIs, nurses, technological achievement, academic understanding, the poor, the middle class, everyone who isn't rich. So, well done to them. I'll be talking about private equity in healthcare next time, if I'm still alive. Hopefully I won't be. Hopefully I'll be, swimming down a river of love in an ethereal fantasy world, listening to Warren Zevon, and wasted. But probably not, so I probably will see you then. So bye!